In today's video, we're going to look at the 2024 presidential election, looking at the gambling sector. We're going to look at what the betting odds say. We're going to see where people's millions of dollars are being spent. We're seeing at where retirement funds are being emptied out on. And let's see if, obviously money talks. And so let's see where that's going. Now, if we know anything about this election is that Trump currently is leading across the board in the polls. The question would be, okay, but the people in the know, the people that are political nerds and also gambling addicts, let's see what they're saying. And so right now, looking at Predict It, a site that I've made a lot of money on, honestly, in college, really cool. Now, by a lot of money, I mean like $200, right? But if you know your way around the elections, you know what to bet on. And so let's just cover all the grounds here. First and foremost, when we're looking at the biggest prize, that's the presidential election, of course, you see that Donald Trump's vote share, and by that I mean like the odds for him winning is about 50% out of 100 versus Joe's is at a 46. Robert F. Kennedy's is only at a 6. And then there's some obviously some stupid money also. Gavin Newsom at 5%, Kamala Harris at 4. Now, obviously, don't throw away the baby with the bathwater in this case, because evidenced by this other website, which is huge. You have Polymarket. Polymarket has somewhat different results, but overall the same takeaway. So as you can see here, people have also bet over $8 million on Michelle Obama being president, which I doubt. Not dissimilar from that. Again, Kamala at 5 million, which even makes more sense. And obviously some money on other people in the primaries, because again, this sort of market goes back about a year insofar as spending goes. And so if you were to bet about $2,000, let's say hypothetically, on Donald Trump, you would notice that your returns would be aligned with about $3,700. And so you can kind of see the ratio of income and kind of like where the money's at exactly. Now, as we can see here, we see that Trump is winning right now by 53 to 41%. Then if you look at the map just overall, you notice a similar result. Now, we're going to break down exactly how the states are being bet on versus how they are in the polls. And so we're just going to kind of suss out what the difference is so that you guys have a better understanding as to who is going to win this election. Now, moving on, we're going to look at the spending. Now, most people wouldn't pick up on this. So this is just the high IQ future law student sort of thing. You see here, we see that Donald Trump has about $15.6 million bet on him, whereas Biden has about $15 million for himself. So that result is basically not dissimilar from each other. So we're seeing that the amount of money bet on each candidate is about equal, even though Trump's up by 12%, which means that in the historiography, as in the long term, more people have bet money into Biden thinking that he was going to win as of, let's say, 10 months ago, whereas Trump is picking up steam now, and therefore the percentages are really different, though the money bet on Trump is about equal with Biden, which is to say that it's a recent trend that Trump is going upwards. Magnificent to say the least. Whereas, again, Robert F. Kennedy, who is pulling about at 10% in the polls, in the aggregate, obviously is only getting 2% of people's money. And even in this other website, Predict It, he's only at 6% when he's polling nationally at 9.6%. And so keep that in mind. But without a further ado, let's get right into the state results. First, we're going to start off with Arizona, where I live currently. That is 60 to 40 odds of Trump winning it. Now, not only that, but if you look into the money, the same trend line is still evident here. You look at Arizona, you see that Democrats have actually spent 35% more money. And by that, I mean that the outcome of Biden winning has actually more money backing it, even though the odds are 20 points in favor of Trump. Not because people are stupid, but only because people back then had Biden winning Arizona. And we can actually cross-reference this with reality. So in a 1v1 election, because that's what this betting is on, basically, you'll notice that Trump is at 5.2%. Now, what's evidenced by this, obviously, is that when you look at the results for back then, you can notice that it probably was closer back then. But let's actually check this out. So the polling only started in October, but I'm assuming the trend line was different if you consider way before that. Because if we remember anything, is that it was not until after the Afghanistan debacle that Trump started this vague ascent towards winning. Not dissimilar from when Osama was assassinated during Obama, where he saw a turnaround in the polls at the face of the recession as well. So keep that in mind. To get even more detailed than maybe is necessary, we'll notice that the trend line for the book here is evidenced as being kind of stagnant towards the beginning as of months ago, but has recently trended in a certain direction that was pro-Republican. Okay, a lot of the calculus for people in the past months to have put money on Democrat is not only that they are somewhat underdogs, but also the fact of the abortion issue, which has recently been remedied by the AZ Supreme Court, which is another asinine tangent I could get into, but I'll save your time for today. But basically, they voted on restricting abortion rights, and then they took it back or something. I don't know. It's anyway. Nevada, similar story to Arizona. They have even better odds of Trump winning with about quadruple the amount of money spent on here as well, which is interesting. Now, again, Trump's winning by 5.2 according to RCP aggregate polling, which is what I use and most people use. Now, you look at Nevada, and again, that's a similar result, but even better. Okay, we see Trump at 6.2% on a 1v1. And if you look at the money here, again, similar result. Again, Trump and the Republican winning outcome has spent about the same money on that versus Democrat about the same. Okay, so 339 to 333, yet Trump is still up 23% in this outcome. What that means is, again, Nevada has been trending Republican over time, as you can see here. If you look back all the way towards last Thanksgiving, you'll notice that they were about tied. And so you see Trump gaining hugely at the face of obviously Latino turnout getting better for Republicans, as well as minorities overall swaying Republican, whether that be the Asians, low population of black people in Nevada, primarily Vegas, and obviously, Biden's not popular in Vegas historically. If you look at the 2020 primary, just as it is an example of that fact. Now, moving on, we're going to go to Georgia. As you can see here, Georgia has a margin of 39% pro-Trump. Now, not a lot of money has been spent here, but as you can see, you'll notice that, again, the betting has been about the same. So if you look at the whole history of betting on the state of Georgia, you'll notice that people thought it was Democrat for a long time, and then they started switching up. And so if you look here, Trump has 2 to 3 odds of winning it. Now let's compare that to the national average. You'll see that he's winning it by 4.6. So the people here are more bullish on Trump than is the polling itself, because this margin over here is better than Trump's margin in Nevada, despite Nevada having a 2% better result for him in the polls. So interesting how that works out. That being said, again, the same trend I pointed out to you guys earlier is still true, that Trump is trending up, whereas Biden is stagnating and falling down, because obviously the money is going more towards Trump now, but historically has been more towards Biden. So you see that reversion proving my point here. North Carolina, which is a swing state that I don't consider a swing state, has Trump winning 3-1 odds. You see Trump at 76% odds versus Biden at 24. You also notice that Republicans, for the first time, have a good amount better margin of spending over the Democrats. So if you see here, 190 Republican, 115 Democrat. Now, when we look at the spending as well, you'll notice that this is showing that people, even before Trump was winning at the national level, thought that North Carolina was going to go red regardless, which is what happened in 2020. So that makes complete sense to me. And if you look at the polls here, again, very strong for Trump, 5.4% in his favor, in fact. And if you look here, if you look in the past several months since November, you see that Trump was winning the entire time. So you see this? Trump has been winning the entire time. So that makes complete sense. So North Carolina, not really a factor. If Trump loses that state, then he's going to lose the election, I promise. So who cares? Again, money in Ohio. Now, money in Ohio is interesting because people say, oh, it's a swing state. If you get some 80-year-old man who hasn't been following politics, when he was in his 60s, Ohio would have been the bee's knees. But it doesn't really matter because Trump is going to win Ohio by a ton. And it's evidenced by the amount of money spent. Only 31 grand bet on Ohio. And of the money spent, it's 89% going for Trump winning. So you can just tell by that fact. Now, not too dissimilar from that, Minnesota is also interesting. And Minnesota only has 90 grand invested in it, and it has Biden winning by 83% odds, okay? Which is interesting because, again, he's winning in the polls in Minnesota, the few that exist. And that's evidenced by, obviously, Amy Klobuchar being on the Senate map, helping out a ton probably just on that basis alone, being on the same ballot. But either way, you look at the spending, and actually more Republicans has spent. Like, this is a really odd one. So more Republicans have spent money on Trump winning, despite obviously the odds being so bad. So this seems like a white whale. This seems like a gambling phenomenon where people want to vote for an underdog, theoretical, where they can make a ton of money. And so I think that's what probably happened here. Now moving on to Wisconsin. This is a state that's also really close. You see this, and it actually has Biden winning this by 8%, which is odd. because again, they have Trump winning overall. Now, if you look here, you see that in the RCP average, Trump is up by 0.6% in Wisconsin in a 1v1, but the gamblers disagree. Okay, you see this 200 grand bet, and mostly Democrat bets, by the way. So Republicans are undersampled, but you see this, and again, 8% odds of Biden winning. Interesting. Now, moving on, you'll go to Michigan. Michigan's also pretty bad for Republicans. In fact, you look at the money spent, it's about in line with Arizona, but even better than this. You see that Biden's up by 7%. Again, not 7% a popular vote up like most polls do, but in fact, it's 7% confidence interval, as in like 7% more people bet on. You know what I mean? So, anyway, 52 to 45. As you can see here, there's been twice as much money bet on the Democrats winning that election than Republican odds. So, that's very disfavorable to Donald Trump. But if you look at the polling, it completely disagrees with it. So that's very interesting how that works out. When you look at this, by the way, Trump is winning Michigan by 0.6. I mean, sorry, 0.8. He's beating the margin he has in Wisconsin, by the way, which is evidence, in fact, of the markets being in disagreement with the polls. And so that's very interesting. I think the polls are more accurate than the market, obviously, in this one case, because I think Trump's going to win Michigan by maybe 2%, whereas I find Michigan, obviously being a 7% odd favor for Democrats to be asinine, but that's why I'm covering this. Now, Pennsylvania is also a similar story. You look at this one, and it's not pretty for Trump. In fact, they have Biden winning by 3% odds, okay? You look at this, 51 to 48. Now, you look at the money spent, and actually more people have bet money on Trump winning, and so this shows a Democratic shift towards Biden, actually. And so this is probably the one state out of like 6 that are pro-Biden, honestly, which is very fascinating to watch because when we look at the polls, you'll notice that Trump is winning Pennsylvania by 2. Now, if you guys remember, there was like a weekend where Biden was up very narrowly, like right here where he was tied, like right over here, April 20th. Okay, he was up by 0.5. Now that was really just a very, very fluky scenario because obviously that's not realistic at all. He sucks. And so this is more in line with reality where Trump is up by 2. And so that's pretty obvious to me that it seems as if that people saw that poll in RCP and actually reacted to the polls that were pro-Democrat and then in turn took their money and put it into Biden. And so it's probably going to take another 2 weeks for Trump to reclaim the lead in the betting odds, but it kind of just shows the symbiotic relationship between the polling and the gambling because there's little things you can read from both sides if you look at it. Now, if we were to chart basically what the poly market results have, the betting odds over $130 million spent, obviously in that course of this election thus far, you'll notice that Democrats actually are projected to win despite the odds, actually. So even though Trump is projected to win about 312 electoral votes in this respect in RCP aggregate polling, you'll notice that Biden's still winning 270 to 268. Now, that's with a caveat, of course. Number one, that assumes that he wins the main at large, which he probably would in this case. But even beyond that, it also assumes that Nebraska's 2nd district would go blue, which if these 3 Great Lakes states do, then yeah, probably. So yeah, basically, according to the same markets that have Trump winning the presidency by 12%, you'll notice that he's actually losing the presidential election. And so it kind of shows that there's a little bit of, although obviously there's a lot of commonalities between what the polls say, the gambling says, on the state level, the gambling on the federal level, you see that there's disconnecting parts of all of it. And so I just pointed it all to you. So now you know more or less what the gambling addicts say, okay? Trump's still probably going to win according to the polls, according to logic, according to me, according to the betting odds. But obviously, if you were to map out every little swing state onto this map right here, Biden wins 270 to 268. It's tough, folks. And I'll see y'all in the next one. Like and subscribe. Adios.